Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Welcome to the Infowars Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Monday, April 25th, 2016. Here are our top stories.
Tonight, can you guess the reason that GOP voter turnout is up more than 60% since 2012? Then, more Christian migrants are denied entry around the globe. After that, a city experiments with ground-level traffic devices, so you never have to look up from your phone. And a 9/11 first responder points out the flaws in the official story. That's next.
The fire department doesn't have the training to pull a building, to demo a building like that.
We're not trained to do that. We've never done that in my 32 years. I know of no evolution whatsoever that does that.
I began to get into iodine a few years ago because it was helping me and my family so much get healthy and detoxify. I believe our research is conclusive. This is the best iodine out there. And I know this for a fact. Nobody else has got iodine based on these pure crystals, ladies and gentlemen. For a limited time, experience the ancient power of Survival Shield X2. I believe our research is conclusive. This is the best iodine out there. Take advantage of this at InfoWarsLife.com.
Well, Obama is in the midst of a European trip. Now, it could be even funnier than National Lampoon's European Vacation. Definitely bigger budget. But it's not funny because of what's at stake. Now, he has gone to Britain first. He did that at the end of last week, lecturing them about the Brexit campaign, the British exit from the EU. Now, the campaign started April the 15th. He was there less than 1 week later. They're not going to vote until June the 23rd. But he was there cajoling and threatening the British people. And I wonder, when I looked at this, I thought about the many times we've had foreign leaders come in and interject themselves into our election recently about Donald Trump. Why? Because of the same issues that Obama is interjecting himself into the British election for. And typically, you would think that they would not welcome foreign intrusion in their elections. And this is very unprecedented. We haven't seen this dissemination of politicians in these elections before, but it's because of the globalism that is involved. That's why we're seeing these leaders come from one country to the other and interfere in our elections, our president going to Britain and interfering in their elections. That's what's behind it. We see the Democrats, we see the Republicans, we see the UK politicians all welcoming that as well. Why? Because they all work for the same masters. Now let's take a look at what happened here. Of course, there was a couple of different things that happened in Britain. He threatened Britain, and we'll talk about that threat here. But after he did that, he urged young people, in the most recent appearance that he had in Britain before he went to Germany, he urged young people there not to pull back from the world. Oh, okay. not to pull back from the globalism is what he's talking to them about. Says it comes a day after the president faced a furious backlash from many in the UK, warning Britain over leaving the EU, saying the US wants the UK as part of a strong Europe. And this is coming from the Daily Mail in the UK. They quote him as saying, our problems are man-made, so they can be solved by man. He's quoting JFK saying that. And man needs to be as brave as he wants. Well, you know, the man-made problems that we have really are government-made. Okay, and that's what we're going to be talking about is what these problems are. It's the globalism. That's the man-made problems that we're facing. He says, you're a generation that is seeing globalization not as a threat, but as an opportunity for education, employment, and exchange. Not as a curse, but as a gift. Hey, you know what? The Trojan horse was a gift as well. And we've already seen what's inside of it. We've already had the European Union. We've already had NAFTA. We've already seen the first group of troops come out of the Trojan horse, and we see them running to the gate to let in the rest of the army. We know precisely what is going on. Don't tell us this is about economic opportunity. We've already seen the results of your economic opportunity. We've already seen the results of your globalism, your open borders. Now, Boris Johnson, the mayor of London, has come down on the side advocating an exit from the EU by Britain. And he took on Barack Obama and was criticized by his own party because he's talked about the fact that Obama was loyal to his Kenyan ancestors, and one of the first things that he did, and this is a fact, is he got rid of the Churchill bust, okay? But he had some more interesting things to say that nobody else is talking about. Now, they say, and this is Daily Mail, Boris Johnson launched an astonishing attack on Barack Obama's ridiculous and weird, is the way he characterized it, arguments for Britain to stay in the EU. And he also mocked the controversial claim that an Anglo-U.S. trade would be hit hard by a Brexit. Now, what we're seeing here is blackmailing and interference, and he calls it out on this. And I want to focus not on the comments about Churchill, we'll mention that briefly, but listen to what he really said. This is what Boris Johnson, the mayor of London, said, who made the comments about Obama. He said it's ridiculous to warn that the UK will be at the back of a queue, back of a line for a free trade deal. He said the UK has never been able to do a free trade deal with the US in the last 43 years because we're in the EU. Any negotiations are entirely in the hands of the European Commission. Only 3.6% of the Commission officials actually come from Britain. So he says negotiations that we would normally have with the US, right? Those kind of negotiations are held up by absurd problems like French restrictions on Hollywood movies or Greek hostility to American feta cheese. So what he's talking about is the fact that we don't have a trade relationship with the United States because the EU has interjected itself in order to manage the British economy and in order to manage the American economy as well to some degree. That's what we're going to see with this globalism. It is not free trade. It is not increased opportunity. It is management of your economy by people that you have absolutely no control over, who you don't even know who they are. And he goes on to say the crucial thing that Churchill stood for, that America stands for today, is representative democracy. Now, in an article on the New American where they talk about the TPP and they talk about the reams of regulation, they point out British voters are getting set for a national referendum in June that will decide whether they leave the European Union or they stay in. There's many issues driving the British exit vote. EU spending, EU taxes, EU regulations, EU bailouts, EU corporate corruption, EU usurpation of power, and EU migration, okay? And you sum it all up, it's EU. It stinks, okay? That's what it really is. And the bottom line is, look, this is precisely what's going on. When you control spending, taxes, regulation, bailouts, corruption, well, of course they control the corruption, power and migration, you control everything, and they have lost their sovereignty. That's the bottom line. And so the question is, as they try to move forward in consolidation, global consolidation, they're starting to unravel from the back end because people have seen what is happening with this. Here's one more comment. This is coming from the Daily Mail. Norman Lamont talks about the president's shameful bid to bully Britain. He says, let me say at the outset, I'm an admirer of Obama, but if Obama is wisely cautious about intervention in the Middle East, why on earth does he think it appropriate to blunder into Britain's referendum on the EU? He says the president insists that he has a stake in the referendum debate because of his country's sacrifice in the war. Kind of reminds me of the old movie White Christmas with Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye. Remember? Every time he wants something after the war from Bing Crosby, he kind of holds his arm and says, oh, you know, I saved you from that falling wall. You know, you owe me. Oh, that's the cards that Obama is actually playing in Britain. Besides threatening them, you're going to get at the back of the line. You're not going to have any trade. Then he talks about the tens of thousands of U.S. servicemen who rest in cemeteries, okay? You know what the real issue is? It's not even Obama pulling their strings, okay? You have to understand who is pulling Obama's strings. Look at the way this played out in Germany. He goes to Germany. What is he greeted with in Germany? Muslim migrants in Germany chanting Adolf Hitler and Allahu Akbar, okay? So that is the ultimate no-no in Britain. You don't chant Heil Hitler, okay? Nothing brings down the wrath of society, and rightfully so, in Germany, than to shout Heil Hitler. But no criticism of the Muslims who are doing that. Is that inclusive? Is that inclusive to shout Heil Hitler? Was he about inclusivity? Was he about tolerance? No. You see, this is about shutting down society, and the government in Germany that would basically fine or lock up people who did that if they were Germans, allow that from the people that they're bringing in. Look at what the Pope does. The Pope goes to a refugee camp, people who are coming from Syria, and he talks to a Christian brother and sister who had escaped Syria. And he promises them that he's going to take them to Italy. Instead, he took 3 Muslim families, 12 people, and he left the Christians behind. Because, you know, it would be so politically incorrect to take the Christians, because then people would say you're playing favorites. But it's okay to play favorites with the Muslims, to take 12 people into the Vatican to show how inclusive and how caring the Pope is. But today in Germany, Obama praised Chancellor Merkel as being on the right side of history because of her welcoming refugee policy. Maybe he should have, what he meant to say was she was on the right side of history because her immigrants are shouting Heil Hitler. He said it demonstrated real political and moral leadership. There you go. And letting in more than 1.1 million people who are fleeing war and misery. She's giving voice to the kinds of principles that bring people together rather than divide them. People are understanding that was what really is happening here. It's not bringing people together, but this truly is a divide and conquer policy. Now they go on to say that Der Spiegel criticizes Obama because they say, you know, she should have told him that America needs to take more because per capita, Germany is taking a bigger hit than we are. And it said, then maybe she would not have needed to call on the Turkish president, Erdogan, to help her. Remember the Turkish president who she is paying back evidently by jailing a German comedian who mocked the Turk? So meanwhile, this compassionate Turkish leader is allowing all the Christian churches in one city to be confiscated. Yet don't make fun of him. And if you do make fun of him, Angela Merkel will jail the comic that does. But she'll tolerate the Muslims shouting Heil Hitler and Allah Akbar. Now, they talk about how this is affecting her. Even though Obama likes this, the people in Germany don't. They see through this hypocrisy. And of course, she's seen her support drop to 33%, the lowest level in 5 years. Meanwhile, support for what they call a right-wing populist anti-immigration party, the Alternative for Germany, has surged to around 14%. Is it really right-wing? You know, they use that term to make them sound like the Nazis when it's Merkel's immigrants who are shouting Heil Hitler. Look at what's going on in Austria. The Austrian far-right party, this is again, they're doing the far-right, the right-wing, triumphs in a presidential poll. They say it could spell turmoil. This is from The Guardian. They say Austria is braced for political turmoil with fears that a landslide victory for a right-wing populist gun-carrying candidate and Sunday's first round of presidential votes could trigger snap elections. Now, they say this is largely a ceremonial role. He has threatened to make use of the right to dissolve parliament before the 2018 elections. And he says, you'll be surprised at what can be done, however, by an Austrian president. Now, what makes him right-wing, according to The Guardian, according to all of the European press? Well, here's the anti-immigration, Eurosceptic. In other words, he doesn't like the European Union. Feels like he's getting a bad deal. Feels like immigration is a bad deal. Even though they say he has leftist stances on welfare issues. So you see, you can even be a socialist in terms of economics, but if you don't like open borders and if you don't like the globalist government, you are a far-right extremist. Now, meanwhile, we see that in the United States, just as I was talking about before, it's the elites, of course, that love the globalism. And as the Wall Street Journal points out, this presidential campaign's populist tone is rankling America's CEOs. Why? Because it's anti-business rhetoric, they say. Really? What is anti-business rhetoric? Well, if you take a look at what they say, anti-business rhetoric is anything that would, quote, according to the Wall Street Journal, thwart any immigration overhaul or derail a sweeping 12-nation trade pact, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So if you oppose open borders, if you oppose the globalist trade deals, you are labeled by the Wall Street Journal and America's CEOs as anti-business. Because, see, their business is globalism. Their business is a one-world government. We're reminded that, again, by Charles Koch coming out this weekend and saying, well, I think Clinton would be a better president than a Republican. Why? Because he knows that Hillary Clinton will support the business agenda of globalism, of open borders, and these trade treaties that were written by the multinational corporations. He says it's possible that a Hillary Clinton presidency would be better than putting in a Republican back in the White House. He said, we would have to believe that her actions would be quite different than her rhetoric, but let me put it that way, that it would be possible. And he said Clinton was in some ways better than Bush. Look, the Koch brothers contributed to Hillary Clinton's campaign, and we're supposed to believe that they're totally on the side of the GOP establishment. And truly they are, because the GOP establishment itself would rather see Hillary Clinton in as president than an outsider like Trump, who is opposed to their globalist agenda. And we see the same thing from Rupert Murdoch, who pretends that he runs a conservative news media organization, which occasionally does take conservative sides, but also supports Hillary Clinton. What is this all about? Well, here's a quote, and this is from the New American, an article talking about trilateral power policies. Go back to this quote from Senator Barry Goldwater, 1979, from his memoir With No Apologies, and here's how he lays it down. In my view, the Trilateral Commission represents a skillful, coordinated effort to seize control and consolidate the four centers of power. What have we been talking about? Political, monetary, intellectual, that's the press, and ecclesiastical. There's the Pope for you, okay? What the trilaterals truly intend is the creation of a worldwide economic power superior to the political governments of the nation states involved, okay? And as creators of the system, they will rule the world. He warned us about this back in 1979. We now see it happening. Can people see the decades-old trilateral plan and resist it? You know, for the first time, we've had massive public awareness of the secret 28 pages of the 9/11 report, thanks to Donald Trump. What if the public became as aware of Building 7? When we come back, we've got a filmmaker and a firefighter who ask, how would that change the risks for firefighters? Stay with us.
As we speed towards the 2016 presidential election, the process for nomination becomes less and less transparent.
The media has created the perception that the voters will decide the nomination, and that's the conflict here.
What you're telling me is it's not a democratic society, and your votes don't necessarily matter because it's a democratic representation, correct?
No, that's not what I'm trying to tell you. What I'm trying to say is that we're just one of the political parties. There's many political parties, but political parties choose their nominee, not the general public.
And I'm asking you, it's more than a process question. It's an integrity of the election question, and everybody's asking me this question, so I'm giving you an opportunity to explain it.
Sean, the only people asking this question are the hardcore Donald Trump supporters.
Why do you do this every single time No, you got to stop. Every time I have you on the air.
Join Infowars this Tuesday, April 26th, starting at 7 p.m. as we cover the primaries in the Northeast.
There's a very important question that needs to be answered. Will humanity survive? And to look at that threat, we have to ask another question. What is the number one obstacle to human beings and our species surviving and becoming a type 1 civilization that isn't just dependent on this planet? You could say that it's changes in the heavens, suns going supernova, tectonic earthquake and volcano events, nuclear weapons, genetic engineering. But if you look at the race, the acceleration of technological development, I think the biggest threat overall is humanity not pacing ourselves and merging with artificial intelligence. So they're trying to end humanity as if it's a good thing and create this new species. Talk about mad scientists. And there have been several new articles on this just the last few weeks. DARPA is testing implantable chips in soldiers' brains is one of them. Another just came out in mid-April. Rich Americans seeks black market brain implants in bid to plug into artificial intelligence matrix. And they're going to go through the dangerous surgeries of being hooked up, not just with a few wires, but with thousands of connections total, to the brain, to an AI computer to try to merge consciousness. My father, a physician, recently went back to continuing education, part of keeping his medical license, and he brought me back some of the literature they gave them. This was from the state medical boards right here in Texas, that soon you'll have to have a DNA chip to get a prescription. Not just that chips are going to be on the pills and medicines themselves, but now you're going to have to give your blood, basically every time, a tiny prick, into a DNA chip database that tracks everything going on in your body as well as your genes. In this short report, we're only scratching the surface. And the big issue here is things they denied 20, 30 years ago that were going on, they're now admitting today. What are they doing that we don't know about? We need to have a debate about our species. We need to understand that the global elite have decided we're obsolete and are moving towards a robotic future where there's no place for humanity, as Bill Joy wrote over 15 years ago for Wired Magazine in his article, Why the Future Doesn't Need Us. And the numbers are in. Screen time, all the television, all the prescription drugs. This modern culture is killing us. Our IQs are dropping. People are becoming more and more ignorant. Society is unraveling and falling apart. So we know that the fruits of this high-tech poison tree are literally killing us. The answer is getting back to healthy living, gardening, spending time with our families, less screen time, and also using compounds that Mother Nature has produced that are known to boost our natural abilities. Humans have built an incredible world. We can change our environment. We do have that magic spark. But the elite think we're ugly and bad and have decided it's time that humans be thrown on the ash heap of history. We have taken some of the compounds that Mother Nature has produced and gotten the cleanest, purest sources of it and put it together in BrainForce, one of the most highly reviewed nootropic brain boosters on the market today that has an incredibly affordable price. Check out BrainForce today and other game-changing compounds like X2 Survival Shield at InfoWarsLife.com. Again, that's InfoWarsLife.com or call toll-free 888-253-3139.
Joining me now is a documentary filmmaker from the UK as well as a firefighter. They're very concerned about something that happened in America 15 years ago. You know, we've had the missing 28 pages. Many people ask, how did we go this long without even knowing there was a missing 28 pages? Well, there were a lot of us who were talking about it, a small core of people who were pushing that issue. Now it has gone to national attention thanks to Donald Trump focusing on it. What is going to be the breakthrough to get us to look at what happened with the third building on 9/11, Building 7, World Trade Center Building 7? Joining us now are Brian Maxwell, an Edinburgh firefighter with 15 years experience with the Scottish Fire and Rescue. He resigned over his treatment by senior officers following a brief 3-minute appearance in a documentary by the filmmaker. Also joining us, Tony Rook and his film Incontrovertible. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hi.
Tell us a little bit about why you, let's start with Brian. Brian, why as a Scottish firefighter would you put your job on the line and essentially lose your job over something that happened in America 15 years ago?
I think that we've got a common bond across the pond here between the UK and the United States. And they both went to war for the same reasons they gave us all. Basically, it's a conscience-driven decision that I made to pursue this issue.
Yes, yes. And tell us, what about the official story? Either one of you can answer this. What about the official story that they're telling us is something that concerns you?
I mean, where do you want to start? I mean, it concerns me that it took over 400 days for the initial investigation to get going. I mean, when my father was a detective, I think if you went into a police station and said a relative of yours had been murdered, and they said, well, we're going to take 400 days before we start investigating this thing, that would bother me to begin with.
Yes.
The fact that, and I don't mean any disrespect to the American people here, David, but your government have a previous history of planning to kill their own people. And I think when you look at 9/11 in any kind of detail, the whole scenario doesn't smell very nice. And when you start studying Building 7, which is what I started to do around about 2005, 2006, it began to concern me very, very much. And as the years went by, people like Brian, who we're talking with tonight, obviously became very concerned as well. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many things that are extremely troubling about the whole story.
Brian, tell us what the official story is in terms of why Building 7 collapsed, because I think many people don't realize that we had 2 planes and 3 buildings that collapsed that day. Tell us what they're telling us officially as to why it collapsed.
Yeah, I mean, they're telling us officially that this building came down due to normal office-type fires. And even that isn't well publicised. What's the reason for that? Why haven't they promoted and publicised that as a safety issue? We're not getting it. We're just not getting it. I think that's why Tony's made the documentary that he's made, because that is one of the issues in the documentary.
And I think that's the key issue here, is that if they're telling us that normal office fires caused this steel frame building to fall down, the only one in history that's ever happened, if that were true, then we need to ask what is being done to eliminate this risk in the future. Where are the studies that we need to see about this to help us to engineer buildings differently, to fight fires differently?
Yeah, I mean, these are the questions that remain unanswered at the moment. So we need to push this issue, which is I have been doing up until I left the fire service, without much success, unfortunately. The promotion of the actual documentary and the pushing of the issues, it didn't get the kind of galvanizing effect upon firefighters that I kind of, or maybe I was naive in believing that there would be some kind of response, positive response in this regard. That just didn't happen, unfortunately.
Now, you appeared for just 3 minutes in this documentary. Your senior supervisors disciplined you for, quote, operating outside the parameters of your employer's code of conduct. Wouldn't you think that the senior firefighting officials would be concerned if there was a new vulnerability for skyscrapers that had been uncovered with the collapse of Building 7 from normal fires? Wouldn't you think they would want to know about that?
Yeah, it's a good point. During the investigation, they weren't interested in the content of the DVD. They weren't interested in the message. They were only interested in looking at my misdemeanors. And they were correct. They did what they had to do. I was operating out with the parameters of the code of conduct unwittingly at the time. And I was quite rightly disciplined, but they've completely not paid any regard or addressed the safety issue, which is something that needs to be promoted and pushed.
Tony, in the press release that you sent me, pointed to a February 2016 YouGov poll, which said that when 49% of those people who saw the collapse of Building 7 doubted the official report, 27% had doubts. So it's only a quarter of the people who looked at that and said, yeah, I could believe that it could all just collapse on its own weight like that. But 75% of the people did not believe it. When I look at this, and when I look at what's happening with the secret, the classified 28 pages that were redacted, I'm reminded that the truth can lie hidden for a very long time until a determined group of people finally expose it. And this happened really, I believe, because Donald Trump raised the issue, because we'd had members who sat on the 9/11 Commission, senior senators who were the chair of the Select Senate Intelligence Committee, Senator Bob Graham, who'd been a former governor of Florida as well, had been working on this, had been trying to bring this to the attention of the public since this happened. Said the public needs to see these 28 pages so they understand some of the people that were complicit in this, and that's being hidden by our government, and yet he could not break through. This is a guy who was head of the Senate Intelligence Committee. So I know that Brian, the firefighter, gets a lot of pushback from his fire department when he starts to talk about 9/11 because everybody wants to just pull back and say, hey, that's the official story. We're not going to look at it. But I think there's an opening here now that people have opened their mind, realize that something has been hidden for a very long time. Perhaps they'll be willing to look at some of the implications of Building 7.
Yeah, I think so, David. I mean, I think I said to you in a communication before we did the interview that I feel that America is so big and so wonderfully patriotic. I'm tempted to use the word idiotically patriotic, and we are in England as well. We just had the Queen's birthday the other day. She's 90 years old, and the whole country's up in joyous arms about the fact the Queen is 90. But I think that the zeitgeist is changing. I've not obviously seen the 28 redacted pages, unless it says, that we did it. I'm not particularly interested in them, to be brutally honest. So I think, absolutely. I mean, there is a sea change happening, and what I'm concerned about, I've looked into since making the film Incontrovertible, and since Brian and I got together. Is there something we can actually sort of pin down? And I'm not sure there is. But in England, for American fire services, is there something we can pin down with American fire services where you can go on strike or industrial action? I don't know what you call it in America. We call it going on strike in England.
Yeah,
we do. Where they down tools and they stop working. I'm not sure that would happen in England either, but it does happen here quite a lot.
Hang on, Tony. We're going to have to take a break, and we're going to be right back. We're going to talk about what can be done, and we're also going to talk about truly the implications that no one is talking about for the safety of the public and for the safety of firefighters. But of course, this information has to be kept secret for our safety. That's always what they tell us. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
It was almost as if it were a planned implosion. It just pancaked.
Well, pancaking almost like a precision implosion.
It's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
All non-essential personnel move away from that collapse.
A lot of people ask me, what is the most important area of Infowars that runs the whole operation that is having such a big effect against the globalists? And I've said it over and over again, it is you, the listeners and the viewers, that send us the intel, the news tips, that support the broadcast, that spread the word. You are 90% of the operation or more. You don't stand beside us, you stand at the heart of Infowars. When I talk about the people at Infowars, from customer service, the shipping department, being just as important as our anchors, our researchers, our investigative journalists, and myself, it's absolutely true. Without this team that we've built over the last 20 plus years, we wouldn't be able to do any of what we've been doing. And that's what's so exciting, because we finally built up to a point where we now have the launch pad. Introducing AutoShip for InfoWarsLife.com, a new way to save time and money when you stock up on InfoWarsStore.com products. Again, ladies and gentlemen, when products are sold out, you're unable to get them, sometimes for months, but we hold back the products for people that have already signed up for AutoShip. When you choose AutoShip before checkout on your order at InfoWarsStore.com, we'll give you 10% off and give you guaranteed delivery of out-of-stock products that are on your AutoShip list. Plus, we're giving you free shipping on all orders above $50. Listeners have been requesting this for years because it's so easy to forget to reorder the products when you need them each month. Now it's finally here. Auto ship at InfoWarsStore.com and InfoWarsLife.com. It's easy. Go to InfoWarsStore.com, select your favorite product, click on the auto ship, and choose how often you want us to send you another order. As you know, I coined the term 360 win, and with the new auto ship feature at InfoWarsLife.com, it's a sure win. You add to that free shipping on orders of $50, it is a can't lose. Visit InfoWarsStore.com and save 10% off on your next InfoWars Life order by selecting auto ship at checkout and get free shipping on all orders above $50. That's InfoWarsStore.com or call toll-free 888-253-3139.
Your liver can be full of fatty deposits, built-up toxins, and even dangerous objects known as liver stones. We worked with the top developers in the field of detox to take tried and true herbs and other compounds known to safely cleanse the liver and fused it with the latest research and technological development on concentrating these ingredients to give you the maximum effect. Liver Shield is the only liver support product on the market that uses a patented Spigyrex blend of powerful organic herbs that support detoxification. And when you visit InfoWarsLife.com, see the instructional video on how to do a 6-day liver detox. This isn't a game, and let me tell you, the results are dramatic. Liver Shield is totally organic and made of the safest high-quality herbs. Liver Shield is the only liver support product on the market that uses a patented Spigyrex blend of powerful organic herbs that support detoxification. And when you visit InfoWarsLife.com, see the instructional video on how to do a 6-day liver detox. This isn't a game, and let me tell you, the results are dramatic. Liver Shield is totally organic and made of the safest high-quality herbs. But that said, you need to consult your physician before you do the full detox. Liver Shield can also be used daily by itself for overall upkeep of the liver. Secure your Liver Shield today exclusively at InfoWarsLife.com for the lowest price available. That's InfoWarsLife.com or call 888-253-3139.
Welcome back. We're talking to filmmaker Tony Rook of the UK. And of course, if you want to see his documentary, Incontrovertible, you can see that at incontrovertible911evidence.co.uk. You can see it there for free, or you can purchase it to share. We're also talking to Brian Maxwell, an experienced Edinburgh firefighter with 15 years experience who resigned after being disciplined for questioning the official story in a 3-minute clip in this documentary. Gentlemen, when we look at this, the parallels, I think, in terms of how we unfold this truth, you just said in the last segment, Tony, that you don't really care what's in the secret 28 pages unless they say, sorry, we did it. That's true. There's so many different questions. There's questions from engineers. There's questions from pilots who have questions about the official story. Let's focus on what's going on with Building 7 and the implications for firefighters if a minor fire can drop this building. Now, in your documentary, you said this would change everything, that the way the firefighters would fight fires, according to one of the firefighters there. He says, we go into the building, we set up a base right below the floor that's on fire, and we work from there. Is it going to collapse on us suddenly in 7 seconds and free fall?
Well, I mean, Brian could probably answer this question better than I. I'm not a firefighter, David, but Adrian Mallet, who's one of the firefighters we interviewed in the film, does state that, categorically. That's what you do. You go into the floor below the fire, you set up a bridgehead, you send up breathing apparatus teams, water jets, etc., etc. And we have been told by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, that these composite beams, hooked up to joining fixtures, column 79 famously, are extremely susceptible to thermal expansion, and they can, unseat themselves, they can fall apart, and then they create this domino effect where the whole thing can come down. And So let's go with the official story. I mean, if that's the case, then any firefighter in their right mind wouldn't go into a high-rise building and fight a high-rise fire because it could fall down on their head very, very quickly.
Exactly. Exactly. And the question is, when we look at the missing 28 pages and the allegations that this shows close ties to the Saudi government and the efforts to allow 9/11 families to then sue the Saudi government for compensation, where are the lawsuits for this building? I mean, is this a building that was not designed up to standards? Is it unique? Because we haven't seen any other steel frame buildings that have collapsed. So what is it about this building that is so unique, if we're going to go with the official story? And why haven't we seen any lawsuits from 9/11 families? Why hasn't anybody sued them for malpractice? Because they were supposed to design these buildings to be hit by airplanes, yet this one collapsed even when it wasn't hit by an airplane.
I completely agree with you. I'm assuming that's a rhetorical question. I mean, I was actually approached when we were doing Incontrovertible and the earlier stages of it, and who I was going to interview in the US, by a chap whose name shall remain nameless at the moment, whose father did the fireproofing of World Trade Center 7. He was disgusted that his father, who's now deceased, was disgusted that the building had fallen down because apparently the fireproofing wasn't good enough. Obviously, it fell down because of thermal expansion, and wanted to talk to me, and we've yet to get together, but I believe him to be genuine. Look at the comments in the film Incontrovertible from Professor Thomas in the University of Victoria at Melbourne, and what he has to say about the theory that NIST has come forward with. It's not very credible, to say the least, David.
Yeah. What we've seen is basically NIST coming out and saying, sorry, it caught fire and just fell down. Well, where are the investigations? As you point out in your documentary, you point out if this was an airplane where this had happened, you would have had the entire fleet of airplanes similar in design grounded until they had identified precisely how that had failed. We don't see that happening here even 15 years later. It's absolutely amazing.
I know, and I mean, I'm not a firefighter. Brian is, and I can understand why Brian jacked his job in. What we're trying to do in the UK at the moment is because we're obviously a lot smaller country, and the firefighting service over here are a little bit more. I don't think it's militant. I think legally we're allowed to do it a bit more. I've tried to research what firefighters are allowed to do in the US, and it varies state by state. So it would seem. Can they go on strike for this? Can they go on strike for that? In England, firefighters are actually quite militant in their own way, pensions and pay and condition, all this kind of stuff. But if we can draw it to their attention that they are in grave danger of having a building fall down on top of them while they're fighting a fire, then hopefully they might be able to do something to bring it to the attention of the hierarchy and ultimately government, which maybe they can't do in the US. I don't know.
That's true. Well, we always hear everybody talking about honoring the brave firefighters and policemen who gave their lives. Why don't we honor them by demanding an investigation to see what happened with this, to make sure that it isn't going to happen again? And quite frankly, that investigation may show that the way that you keep this from happening again is not a engineering solution, but perhaps a political solution, I think, is what lies at the bottom of this. But you interviewed Rudy Dent, somebody that we've also spoken to. Leanne McAdoo had an interesting interview with him in Times Square, somebody who was there when Building 7 collapsed. He said he and other firefighters winced when there was an explosion, just as you would react to that noise. He said that he was absolutely amazed at what happened, but he didn't speak out right away because he was in shock, essentially, from what had happened to his fellow firefighters. And then essentially he was also, for some time, he was concerned about his job. And Brian, I have to say to you, I really appreciate the integrity and the determination that you have to go to the wire with this, to stand up and say, I'm not going to remain silent about something that I see as something that is a concern. I really appreciate you doing that.
Thanks, David. When I wakened up to the reality of this event, it was very late in the day. It was 2010, and when I found out all the information that had been withheld from us on the mainstream media, I was in deep shock for a few weeks. It shook my foundations, and this is to me, this is a really serious issue, and it's not something I'm going to step back from ever until we get a satisfactory conclusion to this.
And let's talk about some of the things that you're trying to do there in the UK. Now, besides the documentary Incontrovertible, you also have a petition that you're putting up. If you get 100,000 signatures, it will be discussed in Parliament. This is a petition to Theresa May demanding an independent investigation into the deaths of 67 British citizens on 9/11. And of course, you're also making available an 11 or 12-minute clip of your film, Incontrovertible. You've got a message to UK firefighters saying, were you aware that any steel-framed building is now susceptible to sudden and total collapse? I think that's a very important way to approach this, to go to the firefighters and to get them to be concerned about this and look at this and say, is this truly a concern? Because, when I look at this, Brian, and I have to say that the people in the establishment on both sides, perhaps they don't believe the official story, or they would do an investigation, or are they that callous with firefighters' lives?
I think, in all honesty, at the moment, I think firefighters, police, military, we're all expendable, we're all replaceable, and that's the way they view us. There's no doubt about it. And certainly on the day of 9/11, I think that 343 souls that lost their lives initially in the two towers that collapsed.
Yes.
They weren't expecting anything to happen other than to be in those buildings fighting fires.
Yes.
They didn't expect those buildings to collapse.
We got less than 1 minute. Tony, I want to end with you. Tell us how people can proceed forward. Tell us a little bit about your film or what you would like them to do. Sign the petition, do whatever. Give us some information about that.
Yeah, I mean, for UK citizens, David, I'm not sure it applies to American citizens. If they can just go to Incontrovertible, Incontrovertible Tony Rook, they'll find the website. There is a petition on there whereby they can sign the petition for safer buildings for firefighters.
Well, never underestimate the power of persistence. We now see people openly questioning what they've been told about 9/11 with the 28 pages, and I think that's the real key. Thank you. We're out of time. Sorry, Tony. Thank you so much for joining us, Tony Rook and Brian Maxwell. And you can see that film, Incontrovertible, and you can see it at incontrovertible911evidence.co.uk. Get Brainforce at 25% off for a limited time at InfowarsLife.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've been on this the last few months. You probably noticed I've been more crazed, more focused, less brain fog, more energy, more special reports, and it's because of Brainforce.
One of the worst things with most energy products is it's not sustainable, right? You're going to crash afterwards. And the cool thing about this is it's not just a bunch of energy compounds that are going to fire your brain up to a higher RPM or whatever, which it does do. This is sustainable. This isn't going to spike and you're going to collapse and you're going to feel really bad afterwards. This has a bunch of different antioxidants and compounds and polyphenols.
Everybody's on these drugs to knock their brain out because the brain's so fried.
We're looking at the television screen for research purposes or whatever we're even doing, trying to learn something, or staring at the computer all day, working, doing good. You're still damaging your brain.
You will find Brainforce and other game-changing products at InfowarsLife.com or call 888-253-3139.
Get Brainforce at 25% off for a limited time at InfowarsLife.com. And we thank you for your support.
In the past decade, we have witnessed unparalleled scientific discoveries in the area of health. But no one has put together a formula that focuses directly on brain health, nerve growth factors, and optimizing your cellular energy at the same time. DNA Force is one of the most expensive formulas to produce. Some of the ingredients in DNA Force are $12,000 a kilogram. We are using the coveted, patented, only American source of PQQ, CoQ10, and more. You want the best that's out there at the lowest price anywhere? Well, we're bringing you a total win-win. The ultimate value, cutting-edge, trailblazing game changer that also supports the InfoWar. We have produced a limited run of DNA Force, and it will take up to 12 weeks to produce more once we sell out. Secure your DNA Force today at InfowarsLife.com or call toll-free 888-253-3139.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks.
Does it raise ethical questions about the use of government money to produce stories about the government that wind up being aired with no disclosure that they were produced by the government?
This would mean that the CIA could manipulate the news in the United States by channeling it through some foreign country.
At CBS, we had been contacted by the CIA. As a matter of fact, by the time I became the head of the whole news and public affairs operation in 1954, ships had been established, and I was told about them and asked if I'd carry on with them.
We need to do this every day of the week and just really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way.
I coined the term many years ago, dinosaur media. That's how I describe the collapsing MSM that we are all basically victims of. And it's not just media in the United States. Propaganda, brainwashing, disinformation is getting more and more out of control around the world as the economic and political structures begin to crumble. But when I see the tactics of the mainstream media, it really makes me sick, because as they accelerate their journey into history, as they become as obsolete as the buggy whip when automobiles got introduced, mainstream corporate media is only doubling down and then saying about us at Infowars and other new independent truth-based media, they're saying stuff about us that's really them. Esquire had an article that came out, "Oh, look, a conspiracy theory about Beyonce and the CIA." I shot a Facebook mentions after she released a new music video with little girls skipping behind her excited as she gets mad at her boyfriend and then runs around with a baseball bat, blowing stuff up, smashing cars, and acting insane. A few months ago at the Super Bowl, she had this big anti-cop Black Lives Matter deal where she's all enraged and the ultimate enemy is the police. That's funded by the globalists. George Soros has spent over $100 million the last 3 years trying to fund these different movements to start a civil war in this country. That's admitted. They want to federalize local police. They want to make local police the problem in every case. And I've got serious problems with the police. I'm the guy that made all the films and wrote books about it. I was Mr. Anti-Police State. But it doesn't mean the police themselves are the enemy. It's the globalists that control our country. They're doing it. The same ones that have spent hundreds of millions of dollars, millions per team every year, paying them to put out propaganda, anti-gun propaganda, anti-family statements. At the Super Bowl, the last 2 years in a row, they have anti-father pieces in them where the father's role is dismissed and men being involved in childbearing is something evil. And Esquire comes out and says that I'm insane or I'm a liar and that I have engaged in, what's this term that they use in here? Jonesian activities. Well, actually, Jonesian is already a word. It's a famous Brit that created a decryption code to be able to translate Chinese and other Asian languages into English rapidly for newspapers. And they go on to say it's crazy. With no proof, with no facts, he shoots a video and says that the NFL and MTV and Beyonce are connected to the CIA. You can type into Google CIA involved in deception in the U.S. and the Washington Post comes up. All these other publications, RT, congressional reports come up. Decades ago, billions being spent to buy off thousands of reporters and pundits to get them to push different federal agendas covertly. The buying of the press has been going on for a long time. Then about a year and a half ago, the Pentagon had a big press conference and said, we're going to stop lying because the alternative media and Matt Drudge leading it have exposed us. And to stop lying, we're going to engage with every local paper and TV station and website, and the Army's going to come visiting you along with the rest. Well, that was their announcement of what they just legalized, engaging in deception domestically. And the first deception was to be, we've been lying to you, we're sorry, now we're going to stop. No. This is propaganda placement or behavior placement where the biggest funders of media now
are actually government scriptwriters, and the CIA meeting constantly with the top scriptwriters in Hollywood and in New York to sell the agenda. That's why every agenda you see, every hero's a woman, every man's a piece of crap. That's the agenda you see where Beyonce's mad at her boyfriend, so she smashes everything to make women all rebellious and hateful of men and hateful of police so that we're all at each other's throats. And then they have the nerve to come out and say the CIA isn't involved in propaganda. They're not involved with the NFL. Homeland Security, the CIA, the FBI, the Defense Department, they're all in the NFL. They're all there paying taxpayer money for this agenda. What's rare is to have media like Infowars.com that isn't funded by the CIA or by the Justice Department. I personally have worked inside local radio stations where they were getting government funding. I personally have been taken off affiliates across the country when they've brought in federal funds for these new hospital funding systems, and they tell them, take Alex Jones off and we'll spend $300, $500 or more $1,000 on your station as sponsorship in the next year. I am experiencing it. I told people a decade ago about the internet kill switch because MIT reported on it. They came out 3 years ago and said, okay, there is an internet kill switch in place. I told you decades ago about smart meters to control all the, quote, smart gadgets in your house to watch you, to listen to you. I told you TVs where you had embedded microphones and cameras 18 years ago watching you and tracking you because I had an engineer come to my office and break open the Scientific Atlantic cable box and show me. Now they just admit they're doing it. And so this is why the mainstream media is dying, because Esquire would write an article implying that I am this term of a liar, Jonesian, things you've ever heard, so obvious they don't need to be proven, or they have a video, or they have reported it, or the perpetrators have admitted to it. While I was sitting there with a computer screen showing people the Washington Post, showing people the news articles, showing them the congressional record so they could go read it for themselves. They just told their readers I was lying with no proof, hoping you wouldn't go check it out. They're now on Fox News and CNN telling everybody that there was never voting in primaries, that one person, one vote never existed. Everyone knows that's horse manure. But it shows how far they've gone, how desperate they've gotten. It's not because they have power. It's because they're losing control. There was a Gallup poll and several other polls in the last month where it showed that the press, mainstream press in this country, is trusted by 6% of the population. Think about that. Other polls showed the same 6% number. All right, that's my contribution, Infowars Nightly News. All I have is my integrity. All I have is the truth. And I wish we hadn't fallen so far that they openly admit that a bunch of federal agencies, including the Central Intelligence Agency, are involved in deceiving us because they passed a law in the Defense Authorization Act 3 years ago saying it was okay. And now we see the end result. The government funding anti-free speech, social justice warriors nationwide to bully anyone who isn't a collectivist into shutting up. And I'm Alex Jones, the founder of the Infowar. And I want you to found your own Infowar in your area and take action today, because this is the great animating contest of liberty. Esquire, there's nothing funny about selling out your country and fellow humans to cutthroat globalists. You want to be in a suicide net factory 18 hours a day owned by Apple? I know it's okay because they're liberal. What is your problem? Stick up for the truth, stick up for journalism, stick up for some humanity, and get a pulse for freedom instead of being a simpering sycophant for the establishment. Do you really think they're not going to cut your throat in the end too? Use your frickin' head. Back to Infowars Nightly News.
Thanks, Alex. That's it for tonight's news. Join us tomorrow night at 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern for the Nightly News. And following that, we'll have live analysis and coverage of the elections.
Join Infowars this Tuesday, April 26th, starting at 7 p.m. as we cover the primaries in the Northeast.
Knockout is back. If you want a product that has 10 known ingredients that naturally get your body to relax, your brain to relax, so you get deep, restful sleep. Knockout's it. InfoWarsLife.com. L-theanine, hops flower extract, lemon balm extract, valerian root extract, chamomile flower extract, L-tryptophan extract, melatonin, and more. All organic, all the natural sources. It's the same price as leading brands of melatonin that are 3 milligrams a piece. It has 3 milligrams, the standard recommended dose for an adult, and it just synergistically puts everything in there. InfoWarsLife.com. That's InfoWarsLife.com, or call 888-253-3139.
You are watching the Infowars Nightly News, which airs 7 p.m. Central at InfoWarsNews.com. And your support is helping us defend liberty worldwide.